I said to her, there is no end to evolution. If there is an end, it ends in infinity. And she said, no, that's where it begins. And it was so powerfully received in my heart. Yes, 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 yes.
Action!
Welcome to the Spirit of Yoga. We are Kirsten,
Devdas.
Burkhard.
from the Akasha Yoga Academy. In today's Tea-Chat, we explore the topic of inner connection.
So we are looking into the internal perceptions that we are having, and that is not just on a physical level, but also on an emotional and psychological level. And later on in the conversation, we'll even dive into the spiritual level of that, in a way, inner perception, inner light, and introspection, or as it is related to the physical body, the interoception. So we dive right in and are asking Kirsten what it means to you to have that inner connection.
Inner connection to me means to be in touch with myself to start with, like on a very physical level, emotional level, my state of being, like in the very manifest realm. So connection to what's happening inwardly when I think of inner connection. And of course, also inner connection goes deeper than that. Deeper than that, meaning a connection to source, to spirit, to the memory, the reconnection to source, to God. So that is for me in a nutshell inner connection. So a connection to my very worldly being internally, just physically, to know, like, am I hungry? Yes, not. Am I tired? Yes, not. And to actually acknowledge this state. So connection is also acknowledgement and being present and attending to those states. So in the worldly realm and also in spirit.
Interesting. Devdas, for you, when you turn within, what do you find inside of yourself?
Universes.
Vast
spheres exploding through the tides of space. But I feel like one of the fun things that we were talking about earlier just is like the inner perception can be on so many different levels. Like Kirsten just said, like, am I hungry? And that seems like it would be kind of relatively unimportant compared to, am I connected to the great source of all life? But in fact, one of the fun things spiritually is that both equally weigh in our maneuvering through the world. Like it's nice to be kind of connected to our higher self, but it's also beautiful to know, when do we need to rest? Should I take shavasana for a moment inside of my yoga class? Should I eat or drink, or do I need a moment just to reflect and to be? And many students, I feel like, when they first come to yoga, there's so many different techniques and so many different methodologies, and I sometimes say that it's like the stick shift of a car. It's like shaky at first, but then as you get into the flow, you start to feel what you need, and you use your intuitive power and also your interoceptive power to see, is this my moment of connecting to the great source of all things, and I'm just sitting by a river and I'm deeply immersed in this great flow of wisdom and joy? Or is it my moment to sit down and eat my breakfast? And in a strange way, they're they're both a part of this inner listening.
Hmm. So what we can see is different layers. As in yoga, we sometimes categorize across the 5 bodies, 5 aspects of our being: the physical, the energetic, emotional, psychological, intellectual, spiritual. And if we look at interoception at those levels, it's on the one hand feeling our body from inside, so internal sensations, inner perceptions. You were referring to hunger, thirst, obvious ones, but can be also, of course, during the asana practice, perceiving my body, sometimes also called proprioception. So perception, receiving, and this inner awareness of where my body is at, how it is feeling. Then other sensations like the stretches, the whatever, shaking from strength, intensity, pain, pleasant sensations, and all the rest of them inside of the body, more related to the physical, direct, tangible aspect. And then on the energetic level can be sense of expansion, heat, cold, vibration, certain buzzing from the prana, vital life force flowing through the body, perceiving the activation of chakras, other subtle flows throughout the body, feeling the chi in the hands, etc. That would be also in most ways an inner perception, even though it can be also a radiant field around the body, but still would probably fall under that category. And then feeling also my emotions, so the feelings, the charges, the momentum which comes from this emotional drive of our being, can be either uplifting positive emotions or more heavy, darker, negative emotions, observing them as they are, seeing them for what they are trying to express. And then, as both of you were saying, whatever is appropriate in that moment, in some ways to counterbalance those perceptions. It's a feedback mechanism in many ways, where we feel a stretch in the body, and then like, wow, that's a very intense stretch, almost painful. So then I acknowledge like, wow, I guess my appropriate response would be to back off a bit, take a deep breath, ease into it. And then of course there's mixtures. Hunger, okay, it's not always when I feel the smallest tiny coming of any hunger sensation that I immediately eat. But then of course there's different layers. Maybe I'm doing intermittent fasting, or for other health purposes or practical reasons I don't want to eat yet because we go to dinner later, and so on. So responding appropriately to the different sensations which are coming up, having an inner wisdom around that. So counterbalancing, to bring our organism back to a homeostasis, to this equilibrium, to that happy medium, neither too much nor too little, and finding that harmony within, which in many ways is the essence of yoga, to balance, to counterbalance. But of course, what can we counterbalance if we don't even know what we are dealing with? So in some ways it's the sensitivity, the receptivity, because if we don't have those sensors, if we are not perceiving, then we also cannot respond appropriately. We cannot counterbalance. So developing in a way that inner instrument, which is actually also related a lot to the psychology. Antakarana, I think, is one of the terms in Sanskrit which describes the whole inner machine, the inner instrument, all of our, not only psychology, but also the psychosomatic aspects, how my mind connects to the body. So a lot to develop and explore in these realms. And yoga in many ways teaches us to listen more carefully to those aspects. So let's dive deeper into this topic of interoception, that deep inner learning. What have you experienced on this journey? Maybe we start with the physical and go through those different planes. How do you perceive your body from inside? how has it developed over time as you cultivated that sensitivity, that receptivity? In the beginning, maybe more gross, rough, and uneducated, not knowing, not developed, underdeveloped, our inner perception. How did you cultivate that? How did you see a development, a progression in your life, in your yogic journey? How in the beginning this or that didn't work so well, and then over time you became more familiar with this inner world?
It's really a learning process. I see that right now, or we both see that in Serena growing, our daughter growing. It is something that kids really have to develop. Serena doesn't know yet when she's hungry. Like just this reading the signs and knowing what they mean, and be then able to actually, classify them. Okay, this is actually meaning I'm hungry and I need to eat, because otherwise I just crash. I have a crash, and that's not only physically but also emotionally, mentally. I'm sitting in a crash. So it's really something that needs to be learned and developed. Or I'm tired. Like, what does tiredness feel like? And to understand, okay, that's tired, and what I have to do for that to actually make me feel better is sleep or rest. So it is a learning process, and I feel a learning process that because the our society is so outwardly oriented, so we are rather going by the clock. Do I have to eat? We are going by outer images, how my yoga posture should be looking like, how my body should be looking like how the body looks like, and a number on a scale is more a reference of how much to eat than actually what the body feels like. So I feel with this strong outward measures that we're using for reference points, the inner reference point is quite weak in a way, or not so much developed. I think many of us know much more scientifically and whatnot, and from imagery impressions, like from the outside, how our physicality, how our being should be, rather than actually having this inner anchors to listen to respond, to understand what that means. And I found that yoga is really, really a great tool to start developing that. I remember in the beginning, when yoga really hit me, I practiced mostly with the eyes closed, and I spent hours and hours with the eyes closed, which was a completely new experience, because also the open eyes, like, usually draw the attention, the focus to the outer world and away from what's happening inside, or at least that was for me the case.
Yeah.
And spending a lot of time with the eyes closed, like, suddenly a whole new world of perception opened. And
Maybe we can stay for a moment with that that internalization, interiorization. In yoga comes under the headline of pratyahara, with the famous metaphor of the turtle drawing its limbs in. So this inward going, because usually we tend to be quite externalized, extrovert creatures, very much connecting to the surroundings, and that is of course very functional in the daily life circumstances for orientation, communication, etc. But to reverse that process temporarily, not just seasonally, where the summer is more outgoing, the winter maybe more internalizing, also during the day on a shorter scale, having periods of outgoing and internalizing. And the senses are one of the keys in the yogic pratyahara, to, in a way, control the senses, keeping the eyes closed, not looking around, but also not listening around. And in this way, redirecting the attention, instead of having it spread over, dispersed, externalized, redirecting it inside. And that attention energy, that energy of perception, clarity, orientation, investigation, trying to find out, figure things out. If we revert that common externalization into internalization, whole worlds can open in that inner world.
That's right. Like, even I feel I discovered my body completely anew, especially through Yin Yoga practice. Yin Yoga is such a great teacher if you really practice introspection and like practice with this understanding that the posture is individual and that there's no posture outer shape that fits all. Practicing with this intention to really match the body to the given. Um, I feel in Yin Yoga I learn so much about just with what I'm here in this existence in terms of where is space, where isn't, where can I actually develop more space and where can I not, because there's compression, there's bone on bone. It's just the end of the story, and this is lotus pose will not be happening in this body this lifetime. Like no matter how much I'm stretching and work on it, it cannot. Um, but I feel there's often like this idealized pose in yoga practices that is our reference point, an outer pose, an outer shape, like an outer form. And we are trying to mimic this outer form, kind of, which is not an inner experience, really. Um, and I feel this is something that we need to teach much more in yoga classes. We need to bring much more to people to make it actually their practice relevant to people as an exploration, as a self-exploration on so many different levels, starting with the very physical and acknowledgement and honoring of being with what is. But this is only happening kind of when I'm not having the outer as a reference point, but when I'm using introspection and when I rather go with how a posture feels right in my body, and from outside maybe it looks completely weird and not really like that posture, but it is. Because I feel it is about the inner perception, but it is something that is of course also hard to teach in big classes, especially also in flow classes, in vinyasa classes, and even hatha classes. Like there's so little time somehow to investigate, and that's why I'm also a big fan of not only practicing but also teaching in yoga, because it gives space for this self-exploration. And I feel actually Yin Yoga is also a good starting point to start yoga because of that. In Yin Yoga, you can develop introspection, and you can take that then into any style. But like with what you hear, you know how to listen, you know how to respond. So another great big point, a fan point for me of Yin Yoga.
Exactly, connecting to our inner world, because we're more or less taught, trained, and habituated to connect to other people, connect in the surroundings, and cultivate these external ways of connection. But in many ways, there's a lack of education about the inner connection. So
education, awareness, emphasis, like what just comes to mind even when thinking about what I'm achieving for like my 5-year goal or so much is kind of outwardly kind of outward aims, goals, like even if they are for my body or for my health or whatnot. But I don't know how many people would have the intention, hey, in 5 years I want to really be stably peaceful, or
aware of my chakras,
or just like be really in a place that I cultivate a relationship with my body, that I respond to what it needs. The body, our like once it came to me so strong in a practice, and it stayed for very long, and the memory is there, and I connect to that again and again in practice. The body is the temple for spirit, so better, like create a beautiful strong temple to invite spirit, to receive spirit, to be spirit. So there is something wise, I feel, in responding to the given, which was definitely for me not the case for a long time. Like I injured myself in yoga, and I think yoga injuries are exactly a result of that, of practicing yoga more like from the outside, kind of from an achievement of outer shape. Like I injured my hamstrings, I injured my shoulder, because I practice with the idea there should be a posture like this or that, rather than a posture should feel like that internally. So it is a process. It is definitely a process, but I feel yoga has an extremely powerful educational effect, or an effect of establishing connection and teaching us, especially this.
Devdas, how did you get to know about this pratyahara, this internalization in your early days? Who introduced you to the concept of internalization? Maybe one of your first meditation or pranayama teachers in your teenage times, some early insights. Did it land for you immediately? Did you get the point and like, wow, this is where it's at? Or some resistance as a youngster? How did that internalization journey begin for you?
Um, it was funny when Kirsten was talking about space. I was feeling like when I very first started yoga, I just naturally loved the immense feeling of space that I would have when I would practice. And someone came very early on and said, you've obviously just fallen in love with yoga, and you're practicing a lot. Like, what benefit are you getting from it? And I said, it's really hard to explain, because from a normal perspective, you would think there's only a certain amount of space in my arm. It's like it's the size of my arm. But experientially, it's just not like that. It's like, you start to open up your body, and it's just a whole world of space opens up. And, you know, I feel like, in a weird way, you could say on the yogic journey, that process doesn't end, or if it does end, it ends in a kind of different way of looking at space. Once on a Zoom call with someone, I was talking, and she was saying, we were talking about evolution, the evolution of human beings, and like what's the drive of evolution. And I said to her, there is no end to evolution. If there is an end, it ends in infinity. And she said, no, that's where it begins. And it was so powerfully received in my heart. Yes, 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 yes.
Evolution begins in infinity.
Because that's when it really begins to unfold. It's like you've recognized that you're not the body and the mind. You've recognized that you're something beyond that, and then evolution really begins to flourish.
The real
because-
profound transformation can unfold.
Exactly, exactly. But I feel like that, that sense of kind of like withdraw that you were referring to, and I actually feel like it's as natural. It's like an extremely natural part of the human experience. It's like it's meant to be that way. There's meant to be moments where you're out in the world and doing and busy, and then there's meant to be these like reflective moments where you just kind of draw yourself inward. And even like you were saying earlier, nature herself patterns herself that way, right? There's kind of moments of rest almost built into the structure of the day. When my teacher in India would meet with people, he would meet with them at Sandhya call. So Sandhya means bridge and call means time, and he would be referring to the time at which the sun goes down below the horizon line and there's this twilight time. And I always appreciate it a lot, and I think it goes back to what you were sharing earlier. Like, when should you come to his house to sing together? At Sandhya call. That's not at 6 o'clock. Like that requires that you be aware that you're looking at the quality of the light. The quality of light is changing. It's time to go sing. And that's such a different meter or such a different feeling than, like, what time is it? Like the kind of detail of the modern world, the efficiency and the kind of like structuring things according to that. And I mean, I find that I think there's this kind of notion out there in the world, and it's completely false, that if I withdraw into like the connectedness of my heart and into the space of my heart, I'll be less effective in my life. Like I'll lose the advantage of the competitive advantage of, what I'm doing. And there's just every evidence from every side, even now scientifically, that that's just not the case. Like that, the more that you come back into your world, the more dynamic you are in your outer world, because the nervous system was meant to be balanced in that way. It's not meant to be in drive all the time. It's not meant to be in gear. When we have it in gear all the time, slowly it deteriorates, actually.
Yes.
And I feel like that also relates very much to the topic of introception on every single level. It's like, how in tune are you with what's happening in your body profoundly relates to our ability to withdraw and to go out and to be healthy in our nervous system. Like, we were talking about tension in the body, and when I first discovered yoga, I was completely enamored with the physical side of the practice. I was just like fascinated to see, what was happening in different people's bodies and how was that unfolding for them. And I remember for a time period, I went through this experiment where I would ask my friends and people that I knew, I would just hold their hand, and then I would say, okay, really give me your hand. Really give it to me. Like, it's mine now. It's
Hand
not,
over the weight.
It's like, yeah, give the weight. Like, let me receive the weight. I'm holding it now. You don't have to hold it anymore. And it was so amazing to see the minute that you, like most people, they're so tense that when you withdraw, even if you give them permission to let go, they will not fully let go. And when you release that hand, it's like it stays in place because there's so much residual tension in their body. And one of my teachers said the greatest block to pratyahara, the greatest block to the recognition of who you are on the inside, is not being relaxed. Like when you're relaxed, you're going in and out. Like I said, you're kind of having your natural flow of life. There's moments when you're out and you're engaged. There's moments when you're just relaxed and you're inside and you're just marinating in who you are. And then there's moments again where you're re-engaged, and that becomes like kind of a natural fluid process. But if the body's just like, tense, 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 and always in the mode of doing, somehow that natural balance and flow of kind of coming in and coming out gets lost. And you can very much, it's easy to see even in the structure of people's physical bodies. Like, I also became fascinated when I first started studying. Sometimes someone would come into class and they'd be like this, and I would say, okay, but put your shoulder down, and they would say, it is down. It's just like, wow, there's so much residual tension in that body. It's just tense all the time. Like, and it's so tense that it no longer remembers what it's like to be in the relaxed state. So I feel like, back to the original question, pratyahara and the ability to withdraw and kind of nourish ourselves from the inside out relates very much to our ability to just be present, our ability to relax. There are kind of so many ingredients to it, and in a weird way, that's what makes it kind of nourishing or fun to begin to play with. Is like, okay, how am I in my body? How am I in my mind? You mentioned emotions, like, and they're all so interrelated that in yoga we call them the same. Like, there is no concept mind in yoga, and that's something that I really love. That mind is a body, just like the body is a body. There's the physical body, the energetic body, the mental body, the higher mental body, and the body of bliss. And as you become more aware, you're aware of the functioning of all these bodies. You're feeling, okay, what's happening with my prana right now? What's happening with my bliss right now? Am I out of touch with my bliss body, or am I profoundly in touch with my bliss body? And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily, you know, taking an Excel spreadsheet like, oh, at 4:35, my bliss body was lost. Oh, it's more just natural than that. It's like, okay, wow, am I really connected?
But what comes to my mind is that life can get so cluttered by all the to-dos and work responsibilities, family responsibilities, social responsibilities, and all these tasks that we apparently have to run after and fulfill, that there's so little space left to actually feel.
Yeah.
And I feel to simplify life and to declutter life allows much more to actually get in touch. Even though it seems like I'm in touch because I'm, messaging to everybody and I'm on Instagram on top of everything. But actually, are you really connected? Like, where does connection start? Also, like, if I'm not connected myself, how connected am I with the people I talk to, with what I'm posting, with like how full is the connection, or how authentic in a way, or how powerful, or how empty. So just what comes to my mind, like when you speak like that, I see like a simplified, decluttered life in front of me.
Definitely. I mean, one of the great modern yogis had the fun phrase, a simple life is a victorious one. And I think, it's funny in general, I feel like simplicity and even silence is one of the most powerful things that we have as human beings. And yet we really underrate a lot the power of it. We don't necessarily acknowledge it or see it as powerful or see it as meaningful. I remember when I first moved to India, friends of mine would kind of from the West would be emailing me, oh, what's happening? There must be so much happening. You must be doing so much, and there must be so much going on. Like, tell me all about what's happening. And it was just like, almost nothing's happening. Very, very, very little is happening outwardly. Simple life, connected to nature, lots of sadhana, but it's like that subtlety of connectedness to life. It doesn't really announce itself loudly, right? It's just more quiet than that. And if somebody hasn't experienced that, it's hard to even explain it. It's hard to even put into words, like, why is that so satisfying? It's like, well, it just is. Like, it just is satisfying. Because it doesn't kind of usually come with fireworks. It rather comes with just a simple, uncluttered life and this, ability that we were talking about earlier between being able to go out into life and do things and operate in life, and then being able to withdraw and to really nourish and connect and receive that kind of sthira sukha asana, the combination of relaxation and strength, even in the flow of life, not just on the yoga mat, like out in the world doing, and then like calmly present and receiving, and alternating between those two.
Exactly. So these cycles of alternating, of externalizing, internalizing, and you gave a few keywords earlier on about the more active, engaged, dynamic aspects of life, which would correspond more to the sympathetic nervous system of
Yeah.
activity, externalizing, engaging, being of service, figuring things out. So there's a time for that, and
Yeah.
frequently, of course, a necessity for that. But then to counterbalance that, as you mentioned before, because if we're too much externalized on an ongoing, perpetual basis, then we tend to deplete ourselves
Yeah.
and run out of energy and possibly even burn out, because we're not restoring, not replenishing by cultivating in a way, the other end of the scale of internalizing, resting. You were emphasizing the relaxation, which would correspond to the parasympathetic nervous system. You were referring to the Yin Yoga, these soft restorative practices, where we let go, we release, restore, and in that internalizing process find peace within, as you described, that stillness, the simplicity that you were referring to both. So frequently undervalued in our modern society, because the apparent fleshy symbols of external achievements are the currency that is highly rated and therefore cultivated, celebrated even, which in itself is fine, but if it's at the cost of the other side of the scale, then it can become lopsided, one-sided overemphasis on one aspect and underappreciation of the internal aspects, which we can see in other ages. For example, in other cultures, there's more celebration also of those inner worlds, and different subcultures like fine arts, music, poetry, etc. There can be more cultivation of those inner skills and valuation of those inner discoveries.
Yeah, and I feel like also, back to the kind of topic of the busy life, which is kind of just like present for many people. For some people, it's just not an option to really completely simplify their life. They have a certain structure that's in place, and they cannot undo that structure. But I feel like what people don't necessarily realize is that the relaxation process, once you're good at it, is not time intensive. It's like, they think, oh, I need 90 minutes on my yoga mat, and if it's not 90 minutes on my yoga mat, it's not going to work. No, like you're at the office, you're doing things, you're working, and you're in your effective mode, and then inwardly you feel, oh, it's just like, it's my 2-minute reflection moment right now. Wow, thank you, life. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all the opportunities. Thank you for all the people that I love. Thank you for this moment. I just open my heart and myself up to receive the wisdom of this moment in a profoundly relaxed way, and just see, what comes. 1 minute of silence, 2 minutes of silence, and I feel like that nourishes us much, 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 much more than we recognize. And even a pranayama practice, like I sometimes tell people say, oh, I don't have time to practice pranayama. It's like, great. Like, nadi shodhana, in your chair at work, 5 minutes, twice a day. Like, you have those 5 minutes. You just choose to do something else with those 5 minutes. And it can be hard in a work environment. Everybody's in gear, right? Just like, but try to remove yourself a little bit, take a moment out. My theory when I first started yoga was that's why people smoke.
To take a
And
break.
I actually think you have to go out of the building now even. Okay, like you've actually removed yourself from the situation. And it's like, okay, remove yourself from the situation, but rather than smoking, play with your inner energy, play with your receptivity.
Instead of doing breath work with the smoke in your lungs, it's not the most beneficial and healthy form of breath work. So just go outside anyhow and take a deep breath there. And instead of having something between your fingers, you put your nose between your fingers and you do an alternate nostril breathing like this.
Exactly.
And even if you don't go out, maybe whatever, it's not tolerated that you leave your working space, and maybe it looks a bit awkward that you do some fancy hand gesture there, but then you just do some breath awareness where you just take a few deep breaths, and maybe you're even pretending you keep your hands on the keyboard and you're looking towards the screen, but you're actually internalizing, and you just do some mindful breathing for a moment and recharge yourself. And even if it's just for 3 deep breaths of just, whew, wow, that was intense, that last 5 minutes, and you give yourself a micro break in that way.
Yeah.
And well, that was content,
but also like people underestimate, I think, and all of us do. Like, I think we underestimate how much people are watching or not. One time I was in a layover in an airport, and it was ridiculously long layover. I think it was like 8 or 9 hours, and I was like, I could sit in this airport and basically do nothing and walk around to all these shops where I don't really want to buy anything, or I could roll out my yoga mat and practice for 9 hours. And I rolled out my yoga mat and I practiced for 9 hours, like really, really, really 9 hours, like not less than that. And I was doing everything. I was doing pranayama, I was doing hatha yoga, I was doing seated meditation, I was doing every single thing. And I thought, okay, people are going to be totally aware and they're going to be staring at me because I'm in the middle of the airport with my yoga mat and I'm doing all kinds of crazy stuff and headstands. It's like nobody looked at all. It's just like, you're in your own kind of universe, and people are also in their universe, and in your universe there's this great flow of receptivity and joy and prana and awareness, and
But what I feel is currently happening is that these gaps that are naturally opening in life, we fill with our phones.
yeah, definitely.
So our relationship
Definitely.
with the phones are
Definitely.
actually keeping us away from taking the chance of actually integrating in life, acknowledging these pauses, these breaks, the yin basically, by constantly being switched on. I'm driving at the moment Serena to school, and it's quite a drive. And at the beginning, it felt like, my God, I'm wasting so much time with driving. Like, I should study Indonesian, which I'm still not really speaking, or I should educate myself, do a course, and just listen to a course. But oftentimes, I'm also just so blissful and happy when I'm driving. I would take that away from me, this opportunity of being present, this opportunity of being in my own bliss, or this opportunity to actually process what's happening rather than putting more and more layers on top. So I feel it's really a challenge nowadays by this. Through our phones, they have such a strong magnetism almost,
it is magnetism.
or
is
addictive
magnetism.
force, whatever we would call that. That we are kind of starving ourselves from these moments of connectedness, interconnectedness.
What you share is so true and so powerful. They even did research recently, which I found highly impressive, which is that if you sleep with your phone completely outside of your bedroom, they've now scientifically proven that you sleep better. So not only is the phone magnetic in your waking state, it's magnetic in your sleep state.
Yeah. People, whatever, even if they, let's say they wake up at nighttime, have to go to the toilet or something, then quickly check the notifications or something, and then interrupt their sleep in that way. Yeah, very much. It's a key ingredient to not have the phone on the night table directly, but charge it elsewhere. So it's not the very last thing and not the very first thing one does, is to connect to the outer externalized world via the device.
But I feel it's really hard because we're talking about addiction, I guess.
Exactly. It's highly addictive, and there's not thousands, but probably tens of thousands of people in the big tech industry working on improving, upgrading the addictiveness of the device. There's so many nuances in that.
My teacher in India used to say, don't keep the phone on your physical body. Like, don't keep it touching your skin, because it's sending a signal out. It's like, it's just exactly what we're talking about. You're broadcasting out into the world. You're looking out into the world to receive something, or you're looking inside. when the phone is on your body, it's in a mode more where it's actually looking outside. He said it's okay, just stick it in your purse, stick it in your shoulder bag, stick it somewhere else. It's fine to have it with you, but don't have it physically touching your body, because it really does reprogram your body in a certain sense to look outward. Um, which is kind of, in a sense, what we're talking about a lot today. It's a fun and interesting sharing.
Exactly. If we see there the topic of connection, which is our main thread, without going too much into that detail of social media, but it is an obvious important factor to acknowledge how this always being connected not only to dozens but to hundreds of people, for others even thousands of followers and people who are engaged and connected to us. But it's a very widespread personal experience and also scientifically, epidemiologically, even researched in society scale, that this age of connectedness, where we are always online and have these dozens and hundreds of friends and followers on our devices, that very frequently we feel more isolated and lonely. Like on a surface level, we have these kind of casual communications, connections, relations, but deep inside, it's very much an age of isolation and loneliness. And mental health topics are becoming more and more a widespread problem, which in many ways is also related to social media. So the seeming kind of obligation to be always connected, kind of like, how come you were offline for more than 2-3 hours or something, or you were online but still you didn't see my message. And even in the status in many of the apps, it's kind of like, was last online 26 minutes ago, kind of like, what's wrong with her, like, why didn't you see my message yet? Like, it's becoming like an expectation in so many ways, and a peer pressure of this constantly having to be connected, but on a somewhat shallow surface level, plus all the other tendencies in social media of showing off the bright side of life, and all my chocolate flavored moments are kind of online, and when I feel down I don't dare to post that so much. So obviously many problems and issues coming through this social media externalized connection, and as you described, taking us away from the inner connection, because we don't leave any space. All of it is stuffed with more and more external connection, or as it is for me in my habit of information stuffing, of being connected to the news. For some people, for me it's whatever different educational topics, the latest research in this and that, and then forgetting to research internally and giving a break to reflect on the inner exploration. So maybe we can explore more practically also what helps us to internalize, how to counterbalance, how to give breaks. So it's almost a known secret in Akasha, Devdas, that you are sometimes sneaking out of the externalized world and just hiding for 3 minutes of breath work, pranayama here and there. So how do you cultivate these things on a daily basis? How do you give space, even though there's hundreds of students, thousands of students in our community, where there's so much need also to serve and be of service, connect, and be in this external communication world, in our team, in our community, connecting to others in the external plane? How do you make space for yourself to internalize? What are your best practices? What is your, in a way, digital hygiene? You mentioned to not have the device directly on the body, to not charge it on your nightstand. What are your best practices to cultivate space for that internalization?
Beautiful question. I mean, I feel like I've just kind of witnessed in my own life, you can say, that when I'm like bright on the inside, when I'm profoundly connected in the inside, everything on the outside just tends to take care of itself, and it's fine. And it's almost like no matter what happens, it's all just exactly happening right. Even when there's seemingly moments that are happening a different way than you would like them to happen, um, there's just this sense of the rightness of it. Like, even if it's maybe not right for this moment, it's right for something down the line. Like, there's just a trust or a feeling like, I remember one time I was meditating, and like all around me, it just happened at that moment. There was this extremely dissonant music from two different sources. And, it's just like when you're in a restaurant and it's playing really loud music, and the restaurant next door is also playing really loud music. And it's like, you can't really even listen to either of them because they're just kind of like, blah, like they're just, and there was just this sense, like in my heart, that was exactly right for that moment. It's just like there's a perfection in this moment that's unfolding, and the perfection includes this crazy cacophony of contradictory disharmony. It's just part of this perfect moment.
Exactly. So having that inner center to remain at peace, at ease, despite of the distractions, obstacles, and all the stimulation which comes from the external world, connecting to that peace within, and not being pulled out of my inner centeredness. And it's very inspiring how you describe that trust, because in many ways the lack of trust, I feel, is also related to that activism, to that hyperactivity of trying to get somewhere, assuming that we are not taken care of, that life will not arrange, that I have to figure it out. And then this running desperately and overexerting ourselves, trying to make it happen, forcing it, over-engaging, efforting to reach the goals that you were describing, instead of giving life a chance to unfold and become supportive and to align itself around our circumstances. Because frequently we cannot figure it out, and it's not a result of individually trying hard to achieve, but letting also life flow through us. And then of course there's a season where we also engage, and where we are of service, and we go strong in those areas, but we tend to underestimate and undervalue how we can get supported. And I feel a key ingredient, as you described it, is that trust, to allow ourselves and allow life to support us.
I remember, like, when I was young, when I would travel places, often I would just purposefully travel with just completely zero itinerary. Just like show up in a place and see what happens. And when you show up in a place and you see what happens, the most magical things that you could never in a million years plot out, if you were sitting there going, okay, I'm going to go to the flea market at 9:05, and I'm going to go over here at 9:07, and I'm going to go, just like if you planned that, you could never plan it that well. Just clear, like, but you go and it's like, you meet just the right person, and then you're in just the right place, and then someone invites you to their house for lunch, and it's just kind of like, what?
Exactly. Versus the control freak attitude which we cultivate in modern times, with whatever, knowing the menu of the restaurant beforehand because it's online, and then whatever, looking at all the reviews and pictures, and people already come to a restaurant knowing the menu and what's the best review, this and that, and then it's, for some reason, there's no coconut cream and they don't have this dish, and I planned for this, and it's like, and I already anticipated taking a photo of this dish and how good I will look with that special dish, like all the other people who already had great reviews of this best dish in the restaurant. But maybe we were in the first place not even supposed to be in that restaurant, and might have been invited to a home occasion by somebody who just crossed our path surprisingly. So trust versus control, letting go of control, that obsessive compulsive hyper organization and hyperactivity, where we try to figure out life too much and then contract around that, versus the relaxation, the spaciousness which you described before. Wonderful, yeah? What are your experiences and tips, tricks, how to cultivate that trust, that relaxation, that spaciousness, that inner peace which allows for life to unfold, even though seemingly we feel obliged that we have to figure it out? How do you trust in life? Especially you having studied architecture, project management, and you're a master of organizing times and timelines and all of that.
For me, it comes down a lot to decluttering. Decluttering life, simplifying life. Like, you guys know me, I'm social media wise kind of probably 20 years back from our current development, so I hardly engage. I keep my life simple, I would say. I have a pretty simple life. There's not that much, that I run after, like that's different from the past. And I feel also establishing few connections and deep connections matter to me more than being connected, with what's going on all around me.
So less is more?
Less is more, in a way, less is more. I watch myself often being in my mind, and kind of that this is switched on a lot. But I also learn more and more to, even though it is switched on a lot, not make that the center of my being. Kind of more like just accept the fact that the mind is running, but like not running with it, basically. And just consciously coming into more relaxation and resting in the heart space. So I feel, for me, it's a lot kind of for my own personal practice in daily life, this recognizing the movements, the mental noise, but not to go with it, and just living life simple.
Would you call that witnessing with what you're doing, or do you think it's something else? Like, how would you describe that as a practice?
Waking up from it, in a way, like I find myself, like, and I feel it, I see it, like, the body is contracted, the mind is running, and it's like, just like, hey, hoops, waking up from it. But also, not in the past, I was aiming for like stillness in the mind, which is then again like this controlling and forcing, and but stillness is not really like mental shutdown, is not really anymore what I'm looking for, but more like to, let it be, basically.
Yeah.
Let
So
it be.
not-
And probably it is, in a way, a process of witnessing, kind of a waking up from the mental state.
Yeah.
And just let it be.
So not trying hard to relax, because that would be the paradox where we can be trapped coming from that habitual efforting, trying. Now I have to put time aside, like I have 7 minutes and I need to really now manifest my relaxation. And then trying too hard and contracting around that, and then I didn't achieve, and then I measured it and still my heartbeat didn't slow down enough, and I didn't perform well in my relaxation.
Yeah, it's just like kind of waking up during the day, during the night. Also night, like not only day, also night, like just to wake up from the mental state and to shift perspective, in a way. Something like that.
So calls for remembering would be when we notice too much contraction in our body, too much efforting in our mind, running into the future, noticing Also
planning, like I have a
planning
very
mind.
planning mind
Sure.
structure.
So observing, witnessing that tendency of the mind to jump ahead, plan, figure it out, and then noticing the contraction of that in the body, in the breath, the tightness, the constriction, and intentionally releasing that.
I guess like there was a certain attraction and importance of that for a long time, you know, like it's important, like I take it serious that the planning has its place and it's important, and I guess like what's happening is to just that this attraction reduces and the importance in a way reduces, so that I don't take it so serious and personal. And
Sure, but this is where the education, the conditioning is coming from. So we have it strongly ingrained, habituated in our body mind. Your context of the architecture, education, and project management, generally the German mindset being very much on this controlling, predicting, figuring it out, and the individual effort and all the contraction, constriction, and tightness coming from that.
Yeah, you know, I still remember there was a moment in my life living in Berlin, outside of Berlin, and transitioning home in the subway. And I used to just read a lot. I enjoy reading so much, and you know, not doing anything really, like nothing productive. And I spent so much time in the subway every day that I was consciously deciding I should use this time to plan my time ahead, that once kind of I am finally free of this bondage of being kept in this subway, can just, you know, act. And I consciously decided to use this time for planning life. Seriously. And it became like a complete self running vicious circle in a way, kind of, that I started times which are, you know, there to just lie back and do nothing basically, that I use that for planning. And it's really a hard deconditioning process in a way to undo that.
But you know, one of the things that I've, like we were talking earlier about kind of receptivity, and one of the strong lessons that came to me that I appreciated a lot from one of my teachers was, like, you know, many years, all of the three of us traveled a lot, right? We were going back and forth between Thailand and Bali and India and Europe and moving around a lot. And in that stage of my life where I was moving a lot, I was always like, I don't know why, it's just kind of must be part of my conditioning. I was always highly concerned to get really good prices on my airline tickets. You know, I didn't want to get less than, you know, I wanted to be the person on the plane that had paid the least for that ticket. And I just somehow wanted it that way. And I was sitting with one of my teachers once, and they were talking about just this, not planning. And then he kind of was looking around, and he looked straight at me, and he was like, even something like airline tickets, you know, like you shouldn't really plan it. You should just like feel when it's right, and you should book it when it's right. And I was just a bit like, well, if I book it when it's right, like I'm definitely not going to get the best price, you know, like I'm definitely not going to be the one on the trip with the best price. And then one day I was literally sitting in line somewhere. I was sitting in line to get in somewhere. And just suddenly the feeling came totally strong. Book the ticket now. And it was like, this is the worst possible situation to be booking this ticket. Like, this is the mind responding to that, you know, just like, I'm in line for something. Like, can't you see that can't you see that I'm already engaged? Like, and then, but it came strong. Like, okay, this is the time to book this ticket. So I took out my phone. I put in all the information. I booked the ticket while I was standing in line. And later, just like talked to a bunch of people who were kind of involved in looking at roughly the same flight, and I found out that I got like basically the best price that was available exactly at that moment, doing absolutely no research. And I feel like, you know, when you begin to kind of like use your intuitive capacity, and we were talking also about the kind of connectedness to the higher capacities, when you begin to use those capacities, they fulfill themselves. Like they actually create more space for you. And you know, I later thought I would have spent hours of my life, like hours of my life, looking for that price, and I would not have gotten any better price than what I got. Like, and you know, there then begins to be this sense of like, okay, I have to kind of sharpen my intuitive sense to do exactly what you were talking about earlier, which is declutter. You know, like I could spend 3 hours and I could look for this ticket, or I could just like be sitting in my heart and feeling like, what's the right, you know, what's the right moment, not just for this, for everything. You know, like what's meant to be happening right now.
That's so funny that you talk about the flight ticket, because just over the last hours and weeks I was exactly into that. I didn't travel in 3.5 years. I didn't leave Bali ever since COVID pandemic, and now I'm scheduled to visit family in Germany. And my mother kept on asking, did you book your ticket yet? Did you book your ticket yet? I was like, no, I'm
Everybody's
busy.
asking.
It's worse with pressure, right?
I'm busy. I don't have time. And then after like the 12th time, she reminded me, okay, let me look for prices. And then I looked for the tickets, and then it was already getting more expensive. But then, and then finding and searching, and okay, then I dropped it again. And then she reminded me again, okay, then let me look. And then, okay, now I really got to book the ticket because she's really going crazy. And then, and then I spent like all evening long, like literally like hours. I search and notice how I fall back in my old habit, like you were describing, to find the cheapest price and also the best possible connection. Because it's always a thing, sometimes the cheapest ones, whatever, they have what you mentioned before, like 9 hours layover. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. It needs to be a good connection, like as fast as possible, but for a good price at the same time, good value. I know, I'm a German, well researched, and then I spent like hours, like 5 hours, and it's getting later, and it's like midnight. And I'm still like searching, 1 o'clock, 1:30, and then, okay, this one, okay, I go for this one. And then I try to book it, and then my credit card doesn't work. And I tried on 3 different devices and still doesn't work. So then I still didn't book the flight. Then my mother again for days is nagging me. Like then she calls me in the middle of her night. She's like, and I was like, what are you calling? Like, are you okay? I'm worrying. It's like, yeah, I cannot sleep because you still didn't book a flight ticket. And then last night again, I spent like afternoon, all like 4 or 5 hours finding the best. And I know it's a waste of time. It's a waste of lifetime. And I could work productively and earn a lot of more money instead of trying to save $68 on another flight ticket, better deal or something. And then I finally book it. And then I sent her a message and she sends me a photo. Oh, look, the first time I see a rainbow in the new place I'm living for the last 3 years. It's the first time I see a rainbow, and you book your ticket to come. Insane. Anyhow, so being connected and having that intuition to be guided, and frequently we cannot arrange it ourselves better. So this individual trying hard to figuring it out, it's an illusion in many ways. So trusting in the source, trusting in life that supports us, and cultivating that inner connection, not just only to my physical sensations, too much stretching, overwork out, this and that, not just my hunger, not just observing my sadness or upbeat emotions, not just being connected to my inner best thoughts and planning and listening to my mind, trying to figure out the best solution, but going beyond my individual perception, interoception, proprioception, perceiving my sensations, but connecting to the universal source. So how to tap into that? First of all, surrounding energy of other people, of what's appropriate in the bigger picture of what is for other people in the bigger picture relevant, how I can tune in with that, but also going even deeper beyond the energy, beyond individual and universal, and I connect to this and other people. How do I go completely beyond body and mind and transcend all that material necessity and best timing? Okay, I'm very intuitively connected to the best timing, but then it's still individually for me to get there in the right moment, to the right place, to meet the right people, and that's wonderful as such. but still, it's just body and mind trying to align itself to some beneficial. See, like, that was my intuition that I meet you in the right moment, and now we can again achieve something and have a good timing to have a project, this or that. How do we go beyond that body, mind, past, future, me in the right moment, in the right place? That's great. But can we just trust beyond body and mind in the bigger picture of thousands, millions of years beyond space and time? That we are just not doing the right thing in the right moment, but that we can just be.
Yeah.
How to be without planning, without perfect alignment and synchronicities, that I do the right thing in the right moment, right place, beyond doing, beyond perfect timing, being connected to this and that I meet the right people in the right time. That's great and amazing. But is there anything beyond space-time connecting? How to be in tune beyond space and time?
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, I think one of the first things that kind of comes is just, it's just like you were sharing earlier. It's a bit of just a reframing, right? It's like everybody thinks of the kind of primary activity of their life being doing, but actually the primary activity of your life is being. And if you kind of pick it up from the sense of I exist, it allows more effective doing to happen. It's like, because when we're in the doing sense and I have to do, we really put a kind of a cap on the creativity of the universe. It's like, I'm here, like I'm the one that's responsible for that. It's like, oh, then nobody can help you. Like, you're stuck with your coconut. Like, you're stuck with your coconut and its belief that it can do things. We were just talking the other day with Mark Laws, and Mark was saying there is no such thing as genius. Like, to be a genius, like, that idea is a modern invention. Like, the Greek idea of genius, which is where apparently the origin point of this is, that you connect into genius, and genius expresses itself through you. And it might express itself through you in that moment in writing, but it would express in a different person through music, but it would also express in a different person through poetry, or maybe all of the above. And it's not that you're a genius and you've done a work of genius. It's like you're connecting to the natural genius, and the natural genius is flowing through you. And I feel like that's kind of like starting more with being and pure consciousness, and then seeing what expresses, is really a different paradigm completely than I'm the one that's responsible for doing. There's this book that I read a long time ago that kind of like touched me, and I found very interesting, and I feel like even if it's not true, kind of factually true, it still is like a metaphor for where a lot of people are in their life. And this woman in this book, she was in the kind of like astral realm. She was in the kind of more the energy realm, you could say. And she was watching over this group of people and kind of seeing what was happening to them. And they were all just in this like very contracted state. They were just walking around like a lot of kind of anger and a lot of like kind of darker emotion. And she said, and they were all looking either straight or down. And she said up above them, she could see there were just beings of light that were trying to help the situation. But they could barely do anything because the people down were just like, no, like just living out their kind of contraction. And, she had this kind of feeling like just screaming to them all, look up, like just like right above you is all the help that you need, like just look up. And but they somehow couldn't hear her, and they're just like in this thing, and it felt like, wow, that's a lot of it right there, just like remembering, look up, like, a friend of mine who was a great yogi in a very unassuming form. He was a banker, and he um, was obviously long hours at work and kind of a somewhat stressful workplace. And he said he just had an alarm on his desk for every 1 hour. It rang at the hour. And no matter what he was doing, no matter how busy he was, no matter what was happening in his life, 1 minute, look up. Just connect in. And then back into what he was doing. And he came and I was running meditation centers at this point. He came and he told me that practice, and he said, "Do you think that's a good practice?" I said, "I think that's the most advanced yoga practice I've ever heard of in my life. Just take a step out for a moment. Look up. Receive, what's happening in that moment. Re-engage back into your world." And that's it can seem like, oh, that's a small thing. No, like, no, you step outside of time completely, and you touch your timelessness. And I think people are kind of what we were talking about earlier, maybe lightly afraid of that aspect of who they are. They're afraid of their timelessness because they're used to being and doing and being in time. But the more we kind of like associate with that space of the timelessness of who we are, the more we get a taste for it. The more we get a taste for it, the more we want to spend time with that. And the more that we see that that's like infusing our life with profound intelligence that we would not be able to manufacture by ourselves. Like the plane ticket, it's just like comes at the right moment. And then you have not one experience like that, but 10. And then it's like, wow, I should like not just do every hour, I should do it more than every hour, so that it's just like, okay, I'm doing and I'm acting and I'm moving in the world, but I'm also just profoundly connected to the source of that genius or that intelligence or that whatever that's moving through me.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and having that regular reminders every hour, every 15, 20 minutes, can be even a vibrating alert on any of our devices to have that regularity. Best even also at random times, that we cannot have a new conditioning and get too mechanical about it. Can be other signs. If whatever this or that happens, then it's an opportunity, a reminder to get out of our mind and reconnect to the breath, looking up, softening the body, simplicity, going out, taking a few deep breaths, nature, and then that regularity, that repetition, that in a way new beneficial habit which we form out of that, first of all allows us to in a short moment drop deep. So we don't need the 90-minute full-fledged something to somehow connect at least a little bit, but we get good at, even in a short moment, to go very deep, open up. And then in many ways it can also carry through. It's not just a on-off, black-white, externalize, internalize, but that we have like a continuity of that inner connection, that amidst the activity we feel the stability, peace, and trust beyond the surface ripples. So that it becomes like an ongoing background, a continuum of feeling that inner connection, that internal presence is alive. Even though outwardly we are engaging, we can stay centered within.
Definitely.
What comes to me is like, for the mind, it is it is scary to be in the unknown. Like the mind kind of likes to know, the mind likes to plan, the mind kind of wants to be in the realm of the controlled and known. And that's kind of a bit controversial, of course, with trusting in the unknown. Like if my primordial state is completely mind identified, and that's also what I believe in, the power of the mind, and kind of that this is the highest state of my being. It's of course difficult. Like how should I open up? Mind is like, no, we don't open up. Like we plan because like we should be on top of that, and we want to exert our control. And what I found personally powerful is the association with people whose state that is. I feel there's a natural transmission, or like a
Definitely.
feel
Definitely.
that is created, and I felt that for me being the most powerful initiation, if you want to say, or like also what made me trust, kind of to see how effortlessly in perfect harmony and beauty people who are connected to source, who just are spirit, um, how they flow through life, and kind of to be in their radiance. uh, this is how I learn, kind of like to expose myself and to soak it in, basically, and just to hop into the wave and to just surf along, and through that kind of make it more and more mine, and build trust, and um, really create this knowingness, or build this knowingness of that this trust is right. And yeah, so this I just wanted to drop, like, for me, very powerful. Of course, also creating routines, how to bring that in my life. But if there's not yet kind of an break free from the mental state, and this is my predominant state, kind of, it's hard to you know break free by yourself from it. Of course, it's for sure also possible, but for me, what was powerful is powerful, is to associate, basically, with people who move in truth.
Exactly.
Also, like what what you were sharing brought up for me. Like one of the students of one of my teachers came to him one time, and she said, she had this concern of, like, if life just throws me like the most difficult situation, like, will I know how to respond intuitively? Like if I was in the situation of just being confronted with, like, like serious life or death for somebody else, or something that was just like a very, very intense situation, how would I know how to behave? And he said, you wouldn't, unless you practiced when it was easier. And that's a really beautiful hint, right? It's like, practice when it's relatively easy. When you're not highly attached to the outcome of something, but you're just kind of like, oh, this doesn't matter. Let me approach this from, like, an intuitive perspective. Like, if I ask my heart in this moment, what does my heart say? Like, okay, I can just even go with the solution of that. Like, maybe it ends up not working out. Doesn't matter. It's not a big decision. And then I slowly, slowly, slowly gain, like, a sense of the power of the connectedness of life. And then I come to a more difficult decision, and I begin to apply it in that. And then as that kind of trust grows, it's like the most difficult situation comes. It's like you're connected, just like this way, because you've been practicing that all through your life in relatively simple situations, practicing that sense of connectedness, of being before doing, of connecting into the higher sense of self. And then it becomes easier and easier and easier to trust that, and then you can make it when the situation is is harder.
As a takeaway message, 3 signs, 3 practices, tips, tricks, how to connect to the inside. What to do so we can be. Or what not to do.
I would say start with interoception.
Perceive inside.
Start with creating actually a connection to what you know, like started in the known realm and the familiar realm.
So perceive your body, your sensations, your emotions.
And to respond, like kind of to acknowledge, to honor, kind of only if acknowledgement is there. Like if I'm like hungry, no, I don't eat because like my intermittent fasting, my this, my that. If I'm not responding, I don't take it serious, right? Like what's coming from inside. How can I take God serious when I cannot even take my body serious and acknowledge and honor it? Or kind of the message that comes from there. So I feel starting with connection, communication, which part of it is not only noticing signals, but responding to them, acknowledge them. Like I would say, like that can be in very different ways. That can be just also checking in. How do I feel today? Like not just every day, good, great, it's just going, let's keep going, but also acknowledge like the subtleties of changes or the massive changes that go through, and acknowledge like, hey, you know what? I'm deeply depressed. All right, I'm deeply depressed. Like that's what's happening, and not like, yeah, everything is fine, it's okay, it's just okay. But kind of to start with the acknowledgement of the given, and with a response to the given.
So opening up, perceiving, accepting, developing sensitivity, receptivity, some discernment, ability to differentiate, seeing clearly, and then taking appropriate action, counterbalancing. But
not counterbalancing, answering, right?
Answering,
there's a request,
responding,
and we answer. Like we don't manage, but we just answer. Like it's a communication, like it's a flow, it's a friendship, it's a yeah, this I would say maybe the first one.
Yeah. Like I feel like my 3 would be take moments in your day outside of time, just like as you're doing just 1 minute or whatever, can be 5, can be whatever suits your schedule, but regularly create opportunities for timelessness. If you're open to the possibility of connecting to something that's higher than your smaller self, like practice that and try to begin to see that moving inside of your life. And then what I would share that's an interesting one that maybe hasn't been brought up so far is like when you have moments where you feel like you've discovered something important for yourself, share it with people in your community in a meaningful way, because sometimes people, of course you have to watch out. You have to not be like, okay, I'm the great knower of all things and now I know everything and I'm going to tell you from the mountaintop how things are at the top. Not with that attitude, but with an attitude of friendship and love and community and servicefulness. I feel like there's this symbol, ancient Egyptian symbol of one hand up, one hand behind. And a friend of mine once was explaining that symbol, and he said it's like you're reaching up to the heavens, and then you receive, and then you pass it along. You're just you're in this mudra, you could say, of I'm connected and I'm reaching, and then I'm passing it to the people that I love. And maybe that's not even in an official teaching role. Maybe it is in an official teaching role. but you're sharing something of your heart and your experience with the world, and that's helping to solidify your experience. That you say, oh no, I can stand by this now. Like I trust that this is what's happening in my situation, and I can share it with people that I love, or a community that I love. I feel like that's one of the reasons people love so much the Zoom calls on both our 200-hour and our 300-hour course, because finally there's a space where I can be with people that are of a like mind and like heart, and I can just say, hey, I was in meditation the other day, and this light appeared, and this is what was happening to me, and nobody goes, that's like some fluffy thing that you're saying, but everybody's just like, yeah, absolutely, wow, let's think about that. What do you think the possibilities are? There's just this tremendous openness and love and respect in that community of people, and being in a community of people where there's that kind of openness is such a profoundly beautiful feeling as a human being. It's like I can really share whatever's on my heart. I can really share what's happening to me in my practice, and I'm supported and loved and upheld in that. And like you were saying, it's like maybe also dark or difficult times. I remember there was a woman who was pregnant on the course many years back, and she came and she said, everybody says I'm supposed to be over the top of the moon with joy because I'm having a child, but it's like the most challenging, most dark, most shadow intense period in my life. And I said, and everybody else the same, just thank you so much. Thank you so much for having the courage to just be true to who you are, and to be totally transparent. Hey, this is supposed to be my moment of joy, and it's one of the hardest moments in my life. Okay, but we're here with you together. We see you, we feel you, we support you. We consciously sending our love to support you in this moment, and somehow we're in it together, and that's a beautiful support, and it's also a beautiful opportunity for solidifying our own experience and really knowing where we stand with what's happening, because because we've acknowledged and shared something of our experience.
For me, the recommendations to connect or reconnect, to internalize, would be the breath, the nature, going out, but in some ways that allows space to go in. And then I have a hard time choosing the third one, if it's connecting to the body, so out of the mind into the body, embodiment. But then I feel also the aspect of connecting to others. For me, those two actually go together, out of the mind into the body, and then connecting with others in, for example, contact improvisation dance, where for me the magic actually unfolds so wonderfully, dancing with closed eyes with somebody else. It's a completely magic space of sensing where the other person is flowing and being in that touch. And I'm doing that for hours, and over years of practice got so intuitive with that, how one can flow together and sense. And as soon as I open my eyes, then the mind kicks in too much and kind of like trying to anticipate and thinking too much, and then in many ways the magic is gone. So this flowing together and that wisdom, that genius flow of the body expressing itself in that shared connection, it's completely wonderful. And beyond doing, just being in the flow of the dance, this is in many ways where the magic happens for me. So in a way, connecting, and in some ways on the outside perspective it's an external connecting with somebody else, skin to skin, body connecting, but it's in a way an interoception and internalization together. So seems paradoxical, but is very much an experience in contact improvisation dance or other forms of dance. So that was our exploration, our deep dive into the inner world, sharing the inspiration that comes from our inner investigation, connecting to our inner perceptions of the physical, the energetic, the emotional and psychological realms of internal proprioception, interoception, internalization, and ultimately overcoming the limitation, the individualization, as we connect to source and embody the wisdom in motion. So thank you for your perseverance in ease flowing through that inner world without trying hard, just allowing yourself to receive, staying all the way to the end of this shared exploration. We trust that you received some new insights to go deeper within in your own journey, to trust that there is a lot of wisdom to be found, allowing ourselves to relax, to soften, celebrating the beauty of simplicity, and going deeper on this inner journey. Thank you so much for being in this together.
This was Wisdom in Motion with the Akasha family. Keep shining in the spirit of yoga.
See you soon.